Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm ready. Here we go. This is Scotty Reed with a Black Talk Radio News Report. My guest for this segment is Sister Dequi Kioni-sadiki. She is a radio host on the program Where We Live, which is broadcast Thursday nights on WBAI 99.5 FM. She's also a member of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. She is the spouse of Sekou Odinga, former U.S. held political prisoner, and has experienced firsthand the issues of a family's ability to visit with incarcerated family and friends. Thank you for speaking with me today, Sister Dequi.
Absolutely, brother. I'm honored. I'm happy to be a part of your work. You always do such good work bringing the news to the people. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. Today, I wanted to discuss with you an issue that has been hotly debated over the past, I would say, month in the wake of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo proposing to change the current family visitation policy at New York security prisons. Now, the change would reduce the number of days a family member or friend can visit from 7 days to 3 days. Now, I understand from talking to you earlier this week that Governor Cuomo may be backing down from that proposal. What can you tell us?
Well, yes, that is the case because there's been a campaign that has involved, of course, activists, but mainly family members. You know, in New York State, there are more than 80,000 people who have a loved one in prison. So those people have been getting involved because prison visits are the lifeline. And so there's been a lot of backlash to Cuomo's wanting to install this outrageous policy of reducing the visits from 7 days to 3 days. So there have been online petition campaigns. There was an online petition campaign. There were phone calls and faxes and to not just his office, but also to different representatives, elected representatives, to say, this is outrageous. This when you talk about holding on to families, when you talk about reducing recidivism, when you talk about people having ties to the people on the outside, you don't do that by cutting their access to their loved ones. So there's been a lot of backlash that maybe he didn't expect, because one, Black folks are always expendable in this corporate capitalist system. But then when you talk about people locked up behind the wall, then they're even further marginalized. So maybe he felt like, well, we can do this because what people think about people in prison is that they don't deserve anything. But he was wrong. People cared about that.
Right. Now, from what I had been reading and researching, it said that he wanted the maximum security prison visitation policy to match that of medium security prisons in New York State, which only have 3 days. Now, this is interesting. I read that they reduced the number of visitations to address prison overcrowding in New York, which has been reduced to a small degree. But the logic would dictate to me that if I have overcrowding, that I wouldn't reduce the number of visitation days. I would want to increase those so that as many family members as possible will be able to visit with their loved one without there being long lines, and where, you will see that when there's only a few days when everybody can come. So have you heard anything in your network about a fight to change that policy in the medium security prisons?
No, I haven't, but I know that across the country there are not just moves afloat, but it is happening in a number of prisons across the country where people don't even get to go visit. They do this video conferencing. So there's always what they do is they try things other places and then it filters across the different parts of the country. But fortunately, we were able to beat this back because it was just outrageous that, the maximum security prisons, people travel really far distances. And as you mentioned about Sekou being a former political prisoner and getting on those buses, when I used to go visit him, the last place he was here in New York was a maximum security Clinton Correctional Facility. And that's about an hour away from the Canadian border. Now, we live in New York City and Brooklyn. So what I would do to go visit Sekou, if I wanted to visit Sekou on Saturday, I would catch the bus on Friday night. I'd catch the bus like 9 o'clock Friday night, downtown Brooklyn. Then the bus would stop in the Bronx and in Queens. And then the bus would arrive up and it went further. Clinton Correctional Facility was about a 6-hour drive, and it would be the first stop. So we'd get there about 5:30. The bus would drop off the people for Clinton and continue on to other facilities. So when we get there at 5:30, those of us visiting a loved one at Clinton Correctional Facility, the processing of visits didn't start until 8:30. So depending on how many visitors was there, you have to sign in. So you could be anywhere from you sign in on a sheet. The first sheet had from 1 to, I think it was 35 spaces. Sometimes they had to create a second sheet because there would be so many people. So they start the processing at 8:30. You get in there whatever time you get in there, because then it's the packaging, then it's the getting through the security, going through women's hair, making women take off their bras, saying no, that's not appropriate attire. All of those things that delay you getting into the other side of the wall. So no matter what time you get in there, then you have theoretically until 3 o'clock, right? Because visiting hours are from 9 to 3 at Clinton. However, when the visiting room is really crowded, then they have to cut people's visits short. And so you've done all of that. One time I did all of that for my visit with Sekou to be cut short after 2 hours because there was so many people. Now, and then I don't get home, then I have to wait. We get called out at 12 o'clock. I have to wait until 4 o'clock for the bus to come back to pick me up. And then I don't get home until 11 o'clock Saturday night. So we're talking about a 24-hour journey for me to spend 2 hours with him. So it's really a toll. And then, there are women who have children. And so children are visiting their father, their brother, their grandfather, and then they have to stop the visit when prison visits can be hard on children because they don't understand. They want to know why their loved one can't come home with them. Right. So then to have that visit cut short and to be powerless to say, I can't do anything about it, it is what it is, that it's devastating. So this was really about a further disruption to family lives more than what the prison already creates. So it was a hardship. It's cruel, it's inhumane, and it's destructive.
Now, I have been doing some research and looking at what some of these psychologists and other advocates say about the importance of visitation for prisoners. So in your own words, can you tell us why is frequent visitations from family and friends important to the prisoners and for the prisoners?
Well, one of the things it does is break up the monotony of prison. It breaks up that like day-to-day drudgery of nothing happening. It also creates the inside out, right? So when people come to visit, they're bringing news from the outside. They're bringing the outside world in. It's reminding people that are inside that they are not forgotten. When I used to visit Sekou at Clinton, there was so many young. I was amazed the first time I went there, because we know things in theory. Right? We know that, as Malcolm said, America means prisons. We know that America has more people in prison than any country in the world. We read that all the time. We hear that all the time. But when you see it, so when I used to go to Clinton and I saw all those young brothers there, I'm talking about people that look like they were teenagers, like 19, 20 years old, and doing like long bids of time because they give out 25 years to life like it's an M&M, like it's candy. So for people in those maximum security prisons, visits are their lifeline. They are your connection to the world. They are the reminder that you are not forgotten, that you are loved, and also they are a reminder to the prison administration, particularly the prison guards who brutalize people routinely, who murder people routinely. They are the reminder that someone is checking on this person, and you don't know when this person is going to come to visit. So, it sends that message, right? There are lots of things. It's just that holding on to, it's those ties that bind us from the inside to the outside. And it gives people something to look forward to. So if I'm in prison and I have nothing to look forward to because I'm 6-7 hours away, my family can't afford the phone calls, they don't let them send me packages, and then they can't visit, what do I have to look forward to? It is so inhumane to think about reducing family visits. But we also know that this is what this corporate capitalist system has been about from the first kidnapping in 1619 of African people, the destruction of Black families. And it continues today with its prison system.
While it is, in my opinion, based off of research, that the majority of people who find themselves, whether they're in federal prison or state prison, don't belong there at all, because they are there because of the drug war and these so-called victimless crimes. So with that said, though, I also read that visitation is important because it reduces the likelihood that that prisoner will be back once they get out, if they maintain those ties to the community and have that support network, that is less likely that they'll end up back in prison. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is absolutely the case because, again, it's those ties that bind. It's reminding you that if you're inside, that there are people out here who have your back and that we want you to come home and we care that you come home. And so we want that to be a part of your vision. While you're doing that time, we want you to hold on to the idea that you're coming home and that there are those of us who are out here waiting for you. And so having support, right? Having support is everything. You take a person who has no support, nothing to look forward to, then what's the point? But you have someone who has support, who has something to look forward to, who knows that, okay, my girl, my mother, my daughter, my son, my grandmother, whoever is coming to visit, I have something to look forward to. So it's really what Cuomo was talking about with the amount of money. My grandmother used to say, penny wise, pound foolish, right? And it was also exploitive and just, making Black folks poor and working class, because that's who fills the prisons. It was so-called balancing this budget or making this budget adjustment on the backs and the suffering of the people who are the most marginalized and who fill up the prisons. Black and brown, poor and working class people.
I would like to change gears for a moment. There are a couple of things that I became aware of since I spoke with you a couple of days ago. And some of the big news coming out of New York right now is Mayor de Blasio announcing that they plan to close Rikers Island. I actually did a video yesterday giving a history of who Richard Riker was in the whole New York kidnapping club and all of that. But de Blasio announced that he plans to support a proposal that's going to come out that says that they should close Rikers Island and replace that with jails. I guess they're going to build new jails in the different boroughs and have the people closer to the courthouse. But what are your thoughts on the proposed closure of Rikers Island?
De Blasio talks a good game. First of all, one of the things he said that it would be a 10-year process.
Right.
10-year process. So in 10 years, he won't be the mayor. Right. So that's just dangling the carrot to say, we're going to do this. And so, but it's going to take us 10 years to do it. Right. And so what's going to happen in 10 years? There is a lot of talk about it now because I don't know if folks have been watching. There's this show that Jay-Z produced about Khalif Browder, the 16-year-old kid that was traumatized. I mean, just awful, spent all that time of 2 years in solitary confinement on the accusation of stealing a book bag. And so, and Rikers Island is filled with people who are not guilty of a crime or just accused of a crime, but they are poor, so they can't afford bail. And so there are people who are held there for 2 and 3 years. And so I just think that with de Blasio, it's more talk. He's appealing, he's a politician. So he's saying, he's saying what the people want to hear, because Rikers Island, there has been a campaign about closing Rikers Island. So you give people, you say, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this, but it's going to take me 10 years to do it. So who's to say how that's going to happen, unfold in 10 years? And in 10 years, there's going to be a new mayor. And it's, I changed my mind. So I just think it's talk.
I would tend to agree with that assessment. I don't know when he's up for re-election, but your points are well taken. Now, you mentioned Lee Browder, the 16-year-old, and that was the other issue I wanted to raise with you. As I found out yesterday that my home state of North Carolina and New York State are the only states that currently still allow children to be tried as adults in criminal trials. Now, I know Khalif Browder never went to trial again, innocent, sitting in jail, or might as well call it a prison, but sitting in there for 2 to 3 years before even going to trial. But, it was shocking to me to find out that my home state, that you could be tried as an adult at 16, and New York is the only other state. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, all of this stuff about exposing New York City, people for some reason have the misnomer, the mythology that New York is a beacon of progressive politics, a beacon of, racial harmony, a beacon of, as I said, progressive politics. And so much of it is crap, right? That, when in the 1990s, and I mentioned this the other night, those 5 boys, because at that time they was boys, they was from 14 to 17 years old, was known as the Central Park 5 case. They were charged and convicted both in the courts and in the corporate media of raping this white woman. They were charged with wilding. I mean, they did all manner of demonization against them, and they tried them as adults, and they sent a 14-year-old to an adult prison. And so, but this country has a long history of not treating Black children as children. White children, rich children, they are allowed to be children. Black children, brown children, poor and working class people's children are never allowed to be children. And so the demonization and the criminalization of them from birth, handcuffing little children, right, allows them to say, well, you're 15, you committed this crime, you're 16, you committed this crime, you should go away for the rest of your life. What can a person, and none of us are the same person that we are today that we were when we were 15. But a 16-year-old cannot buy cigarettes, cannot vote, cannot make choices for their own lives, but you can say that you're going to lock them up and throw away the key for the rest of their life. You're going to try them as an adult when they don't have access to what adults have access to in terms of the law. So I say that, we need to dispel the mythology about New York being this progressive beacon, this beacon of progressive politics. Right.
Another thing I found out about New York, now, Missouri was in the news earlier this year as they passed a law that will allow them to charge children as young as 5 years old with a felony for something like a school fight, a playground fight. But as I was researching for my interview with you today, I found out from Raise the Age New York, which is advocating, on the issue that we're speaking about. But they said that New York allows children as young as 7 years old to be arrested and charged with acts of juvenile delinquency. That's crazy.
Again, that's what I said about, everything about our youth have been criminalized. So from kindergarten, there have been incidents here in New York City, in the New York City school system, where They have not, quote, the adults haven't been able to calm a child down or stop a child from acting out. And they have called the police and handcuffed children. 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. But it is part of the pathologizing, the pathology that has been heaped on Black people from slavery, right? And so Black children are victims and survivors of that because everything about their lives has been demonized and criminalized, from the way they dress to the way they speak to their behaviors. Some of the stuff is really just, when we're children, we do things. And fighting is something, people had fights when I went to school, but you didn't get arrested and you weren't charged with a felony, and the police wasn't in the school and taking you out in handcuffs. Police are in the schools taking children out in handcuffs for stuff that, if it happened in a white school, with a school that is predominantly white students, that would never happen. Their parent would be called. They probably wouldn't even be suspended, because we know with the school to prison pipeline, the disparity between how often Black boys and Black girls are suspended as compared to how often and how frequently white boys and white girls are suspended. So it is a pattern and a practice, a pernicious practice of demonizing and criminalizing Black children that then allows for and justifies for them to be tried as adults, charged and tried as adults.
It's interesting that you bring up the slavery connection. A researcher I was talking to said the average age of the victims of the transatlantic slave trade was 16. That was the average age of victims. Now, before we talk out, I want to again just express how glad I was to learn that you, your husband, and some of the other people I know were not a victim, did not fall victim to terrorists who decided he wanted to travel from Maryland to New York to target Black men and kill them because he wrongly thought not that, it's right to target people based on interracial marriages, but he thought that, this was out of hand. There's too much interracial marriage going on. We're having all these mixed race children. But if you look at the statistics, that most people tend to marry and date within their own group. So he was basically working off of erroneous information. But what are your thoughts on him being charged with terrorism? To be honest with you, Sister Dequi, I was quite shocked that he wasn't just charged with a hate crime and that they charged him with an act of terrorism. I did a podcast the other day where I said this might be the first time in history where a prosecutor has charged a white person who with terrorism and attack on a Black person. So first of all, glad to see that you are okay and Sekou is okay. But I mean, what are your thoughts about this terrorist attack that came to your city?
Well, I think that in light of the fact that he's been charged with a terrorist attack, I think it's been a long time coming, because that level of white on Black violence, people are always talking about, quote, Black on Black violence. There's no such thing, right? There's the white on Black violence and terror that Black folks have been living with from, this young person. What is he, 26, 20? He's in his 28, right? He's doing what has been historically done to Black men who are even accused of looking at, touching, and having consensual relationships with white women. And so I think it's a time whose time has come to call it what it is. It is terrorism. That level of white on Black terror, crime and violence, murder is terrorism. And it's about time that they say that that's exactly what it is. That is what our ancestors, all those Black boys and Black men who were lynched, who were burned, who were castrated, who were tarred and feathered and hung up and cut up and brutalized and maimed. That's what they endured. And so in this example, this is finally saying that we recognize it. Some of us, we need to say that. That's what this is. That's what Black folks live with. terrorism.
Yes, ma'am. As we conclude our time with you today, are there any final comments you would like to relay to our audience? Any upcoming events in New York that you would like to make people aware of?
Well, thank you. Well, one, I just want to remind people that it is so important that we get involved, that we support the efforts of folks who are doing this work. Like, what you do with Black Talk Radio News is so important. We hope that people support that. Join an organization, get involved, do something with two people in your neighborhood that services the community in some way, because it is well past time that we do the things that need to be done to save ourselves. And as someone who works on behalf of our U.S. held political prisoners and prisoners of war, I would ask for people to support them, to contact the Jericho Movement. Go to the JerichoMovement.com website to see how you can find out. If you don't know about political prisoners, learn something about it. I know people who are regulars to your show know about them because you do a series on them all the time. But there's so many people who don't know. But, we have an obligation to support them, because when we talk about doing this work and fighting for the rights of people and self-determination, these are the folks who participated in those struggles. And again, the inside out, we have to make sure that they are not forgotten, that they are brought into this contemporary work, because they're doing the work inside, and they're inside only because they were out here doing the work. So we must not, we should not forget them. So I would ask that people support our political prisoners and do something to help to fight for their release, and at least support them in the meantime.
I know there's something always going on in New York City, a great activist community, maybe more active than any other area in the country. But are there any upcoming events that you're aware of that people should turn out to that's in that area that can?
Well, as a matter of fact, today we're doing the Russell Maroon Schultz committee is doing an event in New York City called Culinary for Commissary. And if they Google that, because I don't have the palm card in front of me, that is an event that's happening today from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And if they check out the Jericho Movement website, they will see, because right now I cannot think of. I know April 22nd there is a memorial tribute to our beloved Lynn Stewart, the people's attorney who recently passed away. So they're doing a memorial tribute for her. So one of the things that this time is doing is that people are organizing and doing things. So there are events where political prisoners are being included. We just had an event for a recently released political prisoner, Maliki Shakur Lateen. That was last weekend. So other than today, I cannot think off the top of my head. In May, we'll be doing, of course, the pilgrimage that we do every year to Malcolm's gravesite, where we leave from the Harlem State Office Building on West 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. We take a caravan of folks up to his gravesite, where we do a ceremony, drumming, talking, children. That's done every year on Malcolm's birthday.
Well, Sister Dequi, I want to thank you for your commitment to the people's struggle, and I want to thank you for speaking with Black Talk Radio News today.
It is my honor, brother. I thank you for inviting us, and I thank you for doing this work and always having Black Talk on these airwaves, so that we get the news out that is fit to talk about, that must be spoken about, so that we can continue to resist. So I thank you. We thank you.
Thank you. Free the land.
Free the land, and free all U.S. held political prisoners and prisoners of war.